take your broken heart and make it into art. She didn't say that exactly, but like that's the gist of it. Like taking what it is and just using it, because that's going to be the most powerful thing you can do with trauma or with an illness. You know, I think that's truly how we learn to heal, is to use it and say, this is part of me, this is my story, and here it is. And that I think is what truly makes us like superhuman and extraordinary, is when we're taking our vulnerable sides, taking, you know, the hidden stuff, the things that we may call ugly or flawed, and saying, this is what it is, and I want to share it in whatever form or way you want to share it, and knowing that makes you so beautiful.
Hello, beautiful creative people, and welcome to the Keep Creating podcast presented by Soundstripe, the podcast created by creators for creators. Every episode, we seek out successful creatives who dedicate their lives to pursuing a creative trade or career. We ask them some questions and soak in all the truth their stories seep. Also, we can package it up and provide more creatives like you the inspiration, education, and tools to grow in your own unique pursuit to keep creating. I'm Joel Porter, and I'm excited for the opportunity to host this show and dialogue with our guests about what creativity looks like in their lives. So, without any more delay, thanks so much for listening, and let's get started. Should you shield the canyons from the windstorms, you would never see the true beauty of their carvings. That's a quote from Swiss-American psychiatrist, author, and 2007 National Women's Hall of Fame inductee, Elisabeth Kübler-Ross. And friends, she had it right. It's no secret that a creative life, let alone a life in general, is full of frequent hardships and struggle. We know this, and we are reminded again and again by the situations we, our families, friends, and peers go through. We all have stories and memories of hurtful times, and it is so natural to try to wall up and do everything we can to prevent hurt or struggle from entering our lives. However, like Kübler-Ross alluded to, it's the windstorms that shape us and help us to discover the unique beauty buried within us. And if we believe this to be true, the only choice we have is whether or not to welcome it. My guest today is the resilient poet and self-proclaimed prankster, Tonya Ingram. Tonya is a Cincinnati native, Bronx-bred introvert. She's also a mental health advocate, kidney transplant hopeful, Lupus legend, cat auntie, and a lover of Tom Hardy and The Office. She has graced the stages of the Getty Museum, Madison Square Garden, the San Francisco Opera House, the Nuyorican Poets Café, the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts, and has been on The Price is Right, which she actually won. She's been on the online and physical pages of the New York Times, Vice ID, and in the classrooms of schools in the US and Ghana, just to name a few. Her viral collaboration with BuzzFeed, An Open Letter to My Depression, has reached over 4 million views and counting. As a friend, creative, daydreamer, and Virgo, Tonya's writing explores the necessity in taking care of ourselves, especially on the days we feel unworthy. She is a graduate of New York University and Otis College of Art and Design, and currently resides in Los Angeles. So, without any more delay, let's hear from Tonya. Tonya, we finally did this. We finally made it. We finally made it happen.
You ever seen those memes, SpongeBob memes, where they're like 10 years later or like 1,000 years later?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I feel like.
That is this moment. That is our conversation. But nonetheless, thank you so much for making time for a little conversation about creativity.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for having me. It's an honor.
Of course. So first things first, I always like to ask our guests, how would you describe yourself as a creative person?
I think I would describe myself as an intentional and responsible and extremely empathetic creative. And I think a lot of times those are really helpful tools in terms of the creative process, in terms of relating to other creatives, or just using my work to relate to people in general.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely I like to be intentional. I want to be responsible. I want to be empathetic. And I want to be kind in my creative work as well.
That's a very unique answer, and I didn't expect to hear it, but it's really refreshing to hear.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think it's important. Yeah.
I would actually like to just ask you to dig into that a little bit more and ask, how do you do that in today's like cultural landscape?
Absolutely. Well, I think in terms of being intentional, I find that my work seems to relate most to people when I'm thinking about every aspect of it and when I'm thinking about why, the why of why I'm creating. Who's it for? Why is it important? Will it add to the value of the world or of just people and their well-being? So I'm incredibly like thoughtful in that process, at least. And I think we need it, especially in today's like cultural landscape. And I think it's important that, at least for myself, that I'm putting work into the world that people can really and actually relate to. Yes. So in being intentional, I think that's important for the landscape. Being empathetic, I think, is also incredibly important because, at least speaking for myself, like I go through a lot in terms of health. And I'm always looking for art and for work that speaks to my experience, that can be empathetic to my experience. And in general, when I listen to music or when I watch movies or TV, like I'm deeply moved by work that speaks to my story, whether or not it's exactly speaking to what I'm going through, but the feeling and the emotion of it ties into what my heart feels. And I find that to be so powerful. And so that's something I also want to implement in my work. How can I be empathetic to people's stories without exactly going through what they're going through, but relating to the feeling, to how the heart moves when we're depressed or when we're going through heartbreak or when we're experiencing joy? What does that look like? And how can I write to that experience? And then in terms of kindness, I value kindness so much. I value self-kindness, I think, above all, because I think when we're kind to ourselves, it allows us to be kind to the world. And so in my work, I try to advocate for that kind of self-kindness. Like, how can I not instruct, but how can I encourage people to find that kindness for themselves? And how can I write it in my work so that when people engage with it, they're given permission to explore that kindness for themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. And man, those are incredible, incredible struggles that I feel creatives especially go through because our work is so tied to our identity, especially in today's environment, age, culture, whatever you want to call it. One thing that I keep hearing you say is, you want to implement empathy, you want to implement kindness into your work, and you want, you value these things so much. How are some like very specific ways that you do that?
Yeah, definitely. I think when I sit down to write, I kind of think about what is it that people are going through, which I feel like is such a big thing to take on. But I want to write people's experiences into my writing. And so I just honestly, I do a lot of people watching, a lot of observation, a lot of analyzing human behaviors, human emotions, and a lot of listening. I think that's such an art form that can always be perfected. And something that I always want to be known for is that I listen. I think as a poet and as a creative in general, I think listening to the world, listening to people, I think allows us to create the best art, really. And so, yeah, definitely listening, definitely people watching. Just being an observer of the world allows me to really kind of find those pockets of connection that allow me to be the poet that I can be.
So, where did your journey as a poet begin then?
I started in church. Well, actually, I started like in my mother's walk-in closet, like at the age of 10 or 11, writing songs. But I can't sing and I still can't sing. And so I went to church probably a couple of years later. It was a small Pentecostal church, mainly Spanish speaking church in the Bronx where I grew up. I had the opportunity to share a poem or two, and it was like my first moment of, wow, like I feel very connected to something that's bigger than me. I feel very connected to something that feels like a purpose. And so I kind of followed that through, and I ended up going to another church, Christ Tabernacle in Queens, New York. And they had a bigger poetry ministry there. And I remember watching this poet, Araya, at the time perform on stage and being so captivating and so powerful just in her words. And I was very, very moved by that. And I remember being asked to share my own poetry at I think it was an Easter service or Christmas service. I can't remember, but I did it. And from there, I just kind of kept going. And it was, I think, a few years later after that, I got into NYU. And my freshman year, one of my advisors recommended that I audition for the New York Knicks Poetry Slam. And there was a cash prize for like the top 10. You got to perform on a Broadway stage. It was really, really awesome. And so I did it the first year, and I came in like 7th or 8th place. And then I did it the following year, and I came in 1st place.
Wow.
And it was really during that time where I felt like this feels right.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of kept going with it. And at the time I was studying to be a music journalist. My passion and my dream was to like write for the Rolling Stone. But after kind of competing in these poetry slams, being in the poetry community and really kind of working on the craft and really seeing how therapeutic poetry was for me, I decided to change my major at NYU, and I ended up studying social justice education using performance poetry, because my dream and my desire was always to be able to use poetry to speak to different issues or speak to what people are going through.
Yeah.
So a long answer, but yeah, it all started in church, really.
So when you were just like discovering this passion, discovering this platform or channel for your creativity, what were some of like the pivotal moments or choices that you made that helped you like propel towards a career in poetry, in this form of expression?
Definitely competing.
Okay.
Competing and going to open mics in New York City and really kind of just putting myself and surrounding myself with other poets my age and seeking mentors that can really like help me hone what I was looking to do with my work. Specifically with Poetry Slam, I was competing in the youth slams, the college slams, and the adult slams. And I was just immersed in like all of this like subculture of spoken word, but of also like this rich culture of what it means to be a poet and what is that responsibility. And I remember taking a workshop. It was one of my first poetry workshops ever. And one of the instructors told the students, like, you have to earn the right to call yourself a poet. And that stuck with me. And I just knew I had to like do the work. And so that meant, again, slams, that meant open mics. That also meant like, how can I bring this poetry to spaces that I don't traditionally see poetry in? And so I taught poetry at Rikers Island for a session to some of the young inmates there. And yeah, I found that I wanted to bring this art form outside of just traditional space. And that helped me really kind of hone and kind of direct what it was I was trying to do, like how I was trying to cultivate my voice at an earlier age.
Yeah. What were some of the things, especially, I feel like it was the first thing that you said, where putting yourself out there and going to these poetry slams and making yourself public. What kinds of things did you learn specifically from that? Or like, what were like the immediate lessons or the benefits? I feel like that is something that a lot of people, especially creatives today, feel like, oh no, I can't quite yet. I'm not ready. That's just a very common question. Not ready, not ready. Or a response to a creative desire or dream. So what types of things did you learn that were encouraging, or like what were some of the lessons that you were like, the only reason I learned this was because I made myself public?
Yeah. I think for me, it was knowing that I will probably never be ready and that the best I can do is show up with what I have, and I don't have to be this perfect poet, and that there's actually probably no such thing. And I was encouraged a lot by my mentors at the time, one being Mahogany L. Brown, who's an amazing poet, amazing mentor, and she really kind of helped hone that voice, hone that desire to make poetry a career. And a lot of what she would encourage me with is just kind of reminding me that what I have is good enough. And of course, in the creative process, especially with poetry, there is the editing process, there is working on the craft, but there's also a beauty in showing up with your work, with your story, with your words, because there's power in that. And the fact that you can get up on stage and share that with strangers is really, really important and really necessary. And so I really held on to that because I was definitely anxious, going into every poetry slam. I was anxious about sharing my work. I still am to this day, but I recognize the importance of just doing it, of putting my name on the list, even if I really didn't want to. And I also had some amazing friends who encouraged me a little, gave me that little push I needed, because on my own, I wouldn't do it really. And so I think it's also important to find your people, find your community, find your support system that will champion your art, your creativity. And I'm very, very thankful that I found that with Mahogany, also with a youth organization in New York called Urban Word, which was basically a nonprofit, mainly after school, where kids can come and take poetry workshops. That's how I got involved with the New York Knicks Poetry Slam. They have a bunch of amazing opportunities for young writers in New York City. And so I got involved with them. I had a mentor. I was, taking classes at NYU. I was really dedicated to figuring out how I can really hone this. But it's definitely because of the support I had, and definitely just putting myself out there and knowing that I was going to be okay because I was surrounded by others who understand what this process is.
I've heard you mention it a couple times now that you have had some influence from mentors.
Yes.
What did you look for in a mentor? Or what were the qualities in a mentor that resonated with you, that encouraged you? The people, what drew you in to the specific people who made the most impact on you?
I think I was most drawn to my mentors' confidence. I was drawn to how magnetic they were. I was drawn to the quality of their work. I was drawn to what they were doing outside of our local venues. I love to see my mentors traveling and doing poetry in New Zealand or doing it in South Africa or London, to know that I can, exist beyond where I'm from. I think was really, really important for me, because I grew up in the Bronx, which is such a beautiful city. And I'm so thankful to have been raised in the Bronx. But I also had a longing and a passion to travel, and to know that I was coming across mentors, poets who were doing this full time. I think that was really special to me, because I didn't want a traditional 9 to 5 job. It freaked me out a little bit. And seeing that you could use your creative passions and it can become a career, I think that was a little it made me very starry-eyed. And it reminded me of the first time I saw someone perform poetry on stage at church. It was wow, this is possible. And so I was definitely just continuing to surround myself. I interned for my mentor before she was my mentor. She has a small publishing press called Penmanship Books, and I was interning for her. And so that gave me the knowledge and the tools I needed to understand how does a poet make money, by having a publishing house, by being a touring poet, by having books, and so it was just cool to just see what it looked like to be a professional poet.
Yeah, absolutely. So in that pursuit now, after you've talked with your mentors and you've learned from them and you've seen what a working, poet does on the daily, what are some practices and habits and tools that you discovered during that period that like significantly impacted the way that you went about being a creative professionally?
Definitely discipline, finding one's own routine. Because it's not a traditional 9 to 5, you have to form your own hours. So what does it look like when you're waking up, and what are you doing throughout the day? And then what do and how do you prepare for the next day? And so it was really important for me to see, okay, this is what it looks like to be a disciplined writer, write at least, 30 minutes a day, or, engage with some kind of artistic event. I don't know, but just finding ways to be involved, but also taking care of your own creative self is really important. And yeah, that's something I definitely I see even now, just like finding that discipline, finding what works for you. I think a lot of times I'm often asked, what's your writing process? And that's such an important question. But I think I learned how to answer that by looking at other poets and
Yeah,
seeing what is it that they do, what works for them, and then coming back to myself and saying, okay, well, what will work for you? Maybe what works for this amazing poet is not going to work for you.
sure.
And so just figuring out what works for me by observing others.
So what does that look like for you now? What is your, not your necessarily process, but what's your daily routine? What are the things that are like pillars in your day that, whether it is some form of input or, this time is writing, just so that, hopefully our listeners can learn and maybe model their day or habits after what you do.
Absolutely. I definitely in the morning try to have that be for myself, have that be a sacred moment before I do anything. And that can mean maybe 5 minutes of meditation or some deep breathing, or yeah, whatever I need to feel at peace to start my day. And then in terms of actually being creative, I give myself some time to write. But I think I'm able to be in that space because I was able to take care of the house first, the house being myself, being my
Yeah.
body, making sure that I'm good, because I can't, draw from an empty well. And so I think it's important. Self-care is so important for any creative, for any person, really, before we do anything, that we're checking in with ourselves. And so once I feel like I've done that, I can go on and be creative. I usually maybe try to write something without any judgment, just a free write, just flow of consciousness, just getting whatever I'm feeling out, kind of like a journal entry or a diary. And then I try to engage with the world. Either I'll take a walk, do some observation, some people watching, just connecting to everything and to the human experience, or I'll sit at home and watch Fleabag or The Office or Bob's Burgers, or yeah, something like that, just to get myself, kind of just loose or just excited or inspired. And then I will think about projects I want to work on. And I have a dry erase board, and I'm always working on that, always constantly thinking about what it is I want to do. And I live with two other artists as well, two other poets, and we're all always in conversation about what it means to take this art to another form, about what we're doing. And so I feel like I'm constantly in a process, or constantly in a routine of figuring out what it means to be creative. But I think in conjunction with that, I also have some health things going on in my life. And so that also takes up a lot of time. And so it's been really interesting to kind of balance my health and also my art, because they both are full-time jobs. And so my thing now is, how can I combine the two instead of separating the two? And so recently my routine and my process looks a lot different than what it did when I was at NYU or when I first moved to Los Angeles, because now my health is involved. And so I want to be able to use that. And that's something I've always been a fan of, is using what I've gone through, using trauma, using, days that are hard to talk about, and using it in my art, because it's always a little easier for me to channel it in a poem or in a performance than it is to just talk about it.
Absolutely.
And so that's something I'm working on now, is how can I talk about my depression? How can I talk about my lupus? How can I talk about my kidney failure? Because I know that there are so many other people in this world who are dealing with these things. And so how can I be intentional? How can I be empathetic? And how can I be kind to myself, to my story, but also to others who are dealing with all of these other health issues as well? And how can I speak to their experience by talking about my own? And so my process now moves a little differently.
Absolutely.
In the mornings, I am often usually nauseous because I have dialysis either the day before or that day. And so I have to work with my body differently. I have to find joy. Self-care looks a lot different than it did. So it's a lot more complicated, but it's also a lot more fulfilling in terms of creativity and all of that.
Yeah. How has it been trying to access those, creative wells when, like you said, the home that you're living in currently needs so much care and there is so much trial and like perseverance needed in order to get there? Like, how has that been?
It's been a journey. It's been a lot. And I think I do a really good job at kind of like going through it and just kind of putting my head down and just saying, I have to get this done. I have to write this book. I have to whatever. And so the moments that I kind of pause and look at like what's happening in my life, it can be pretty heavy. And that's why I find poetry and kind of what I'm able to do creatively is very important, because I don't know, I look at my life, I look at like my health, and I'm often discouraged by it. But when I work on my art, I'm highly encouraged because of the response, because of the kind of the people like letting me know, hey, I also have lupus. Hey, I'm also going through dialysis. Hey, I'm also struggling with depression. And your words or your work or just sharing, whatever you're sharing, it's helping me get through my day. And so that helps me a million times more than like having to go to dialysis at 3 a.m.
Hey everyone, this is the part of the show where I salute the amazing music featured on today's episode. You can license today's song, Last Night by Tide Electric, by simply heading to soundstripe.com/keepcreating. There you'll find a custom playlist of all the songs we use on our podcast. Once again, that's soundstripe.com/keepcreating. Also, please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast so we can continue our pursuit to providing as much value as we can for creatives just like you. All right, let's get back to the conversation. I just want to not necessarily applaud, but commend that. I mean, there are so many creatives who aren't going through anything nearly as difficult, who find excuses. And I'm not here to like dog on anybody. Believe me, like we have an incredibly inspiring community within this podcast and within our company and everything like that. But this should just be a testament to the ability to do something regardless of the circumstances surrounding.
Yeah.
And so I'm very, very sympathetic to your situation, but at the same time, I find myself feeling very, very encouraged. So, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
I think that it's incredibly commendable. What was one thing that you were talking about earlier, and one thing that I keep hearing as woven into your narrative is this like extreme gratitude that you have the opportunity to have a platform for your voice.
Yeah.
What was your journey like finding that voice? What What was it like, and what were some of the things that you did in order to recognize your voice? Because I feel like a lot of times that's a question creatives are dealing with, whether it be,
Mhm.
not necessarily knowing their identity or worried that there's too much like replication or imitation
Mhm.
from the people that they admire and look up to. What was the journey like, and what are some tools or things that you did to kind of hone into your own voice?
Yeah. It definitely took a lot of trial and error. When I started out performing my poetry, I was definitely inspired by a lot of poets who were local in my area. And so I found myself imitating their performance techniques, just being really inspired. And so I knew that at that time, my voice wasn't my own. It was still kind of finding its own legs. And so going through a lot of, call it craft work, so a lot of the just workshopping and being at the open mics, competing in poetry slams, which within that world, I was being coached heavily by some amazing poets. We were getting several different writing prompts, several techniques that can teach us how to hone our voice, how to stand, in a performance. And those techniques were very helpful. But it wasn't really until graduate school that I figured out, oh, this is like what it is that works for me.
Mm-hmm.
And it came after the first semester of graduate school, because that's when I got diagnosed with lupus. And I was in the hospital that winter break for a month. And it was really during that time that I found myself figuring out, like, oh, I need to write for this. Like, this is what's important. And this is my voice, because right now I've just been diagnosed with a chronic illness that's not going anywhere.
Right.
So I want to learn how to engage with this. How can I use what I've learned thus far to speak to this experience? Because this is my life now. My life is very different. I'm a different girl now, a woman. And how do I live with that? Like, how do I make sense of this? And
Right.
so I made it my responsibility to weave in this new part of my life into my work. And so I got diagnosed with lupus. And then I think a few months later, I was in the psychiatric hospital for suicidal ideation. And that was another moment for me where I was like, okay, I have to use this stuff, because if I don't, it's just going to sit quietly inside of me. And I think to me, that's more damaging to my whole being. And I'm a person who firmly believes that vulnerability is strength. And it's okay to talk about the things that maybe are uncomfortable, but only if it's comfortable for you to do that. And I also believe everyone has their own journey and path and talking about some uncomfortable things. But in that moment, I knew, like, this, I have to use this. And even this past year, being diagnosed with end stage kidney failure, and then learning that, like, I have to use dialysis or be on dialysis until I receive a kidney transplant, that was a lot. And I was like, okay, like, what do I do with this? And again, it was that familiar thing of, okay, we have to use it. How can we use this, Tonya? And so I went to social media, and that's been another amazing platform of space, a community space, a safe space where I can share my story, share what it means to go to dialysis, or share a poem about, like, going through depression and I'm not okay today, but, like, I just wanted to share this piece with y'all, and finding that other people are in that same space and we can have our own community there. But yeah, just using it. I don't know who said it, but I think it was Meryl Streep. Take your broken heart and make it into art. She didn't say that exactly, but, like, that's the gist of it. Like,
Yeah.
taking what it is and just using it, because that's going to be the most powerful thing you can do with trauma or with an illness. I think that's truly how we learn to heal, is
Mm-hmm.
to use it and say, this is part of me. This is my story. And here it is. And that, I think, is what truly makes us, like, superhuman and extraordinary, is when we're taking our vulnerable sides, taking the hidden stuff, the things that we may call ugly or flawed, and saying this is what it is, and I want to share it in whatever form or way you want to share it, and knowing that that makes you so beautiful to be able to say this is what I'm going through. I don't know, where it's going to take me. I may not feel good today. Like, it's a lot to deal with, but like, this is where I'm at. And just showing up and giving yourself that full permission to be exactly as you are, I think is honestly just what keeps me going.
Yeah. It sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like you've taken the situations that you've been in and allowed them to be motivators.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
You had mentioned social media in the last little bit there. And oftentimes that comes up as something, as an answer to this question. But what do you believe are some of the challenges, like the biggest challenges that young creatives have to navigate through today?
I think social media can be an uphill little battle. Definitely trying to figure out where you fit in that space. I think finding voice, finding originality. But I think in all of that, as long as you're checked in with yourself, whatever you put out there, I think is going to be of the most amazing value. But that doesn't mean it's also real. I think being 28, I'm not like super, super young, but I understand like the pressures of social media and like, how can I stand out on social media? How can I have the most engagement on social media? Like, if I don't get enough likes, does that mean my work is not important enough? Like, so there are all those factors that play into it. And those are, I think, struggles for sure. I think being young and creative, where social media is kind of one of the main platforms and getting your work out there. But I think this always comes back to, if you're checked in, self-care, knowing that it's okay to show up exactly as you are, giving yourself that full permission to be you. And knowing that, again, your vulnerability is your greatest strength. I think having those little reminders as you navigate social media or as you try to figure out what is your voice will be really amazing grounding tools to keep you within yourself and close to the work, which is ultimately, the most important thing.
Is there anything else, if you could go back in a time machine and talk with yourself, the younger version of yourself, any piece of advice that you'd give that younger version of yourself?
Yeah, that it's definitely okay to ask for help. I can be very independent and like very just like, I can do this, I got this. But there is such a value in community and in a support system. And I only really, really understood that given everything I'd gone through with my health.
Yeah.
And I had support before that, but I think I really understood the value of it now. And it's okay to know that there are other people who support your vision and support your dream and support your story. And so that's one thing I would tell myself, just allow yourself to be offered help.
Yeah.
People want to help. People believe in what you have to say and they believe in your dream. And I think that was huge too, because I think growing up, I don't know, like I feel like I didn't have all of the support or just not as much as I think I needed. And so to be receiving that now in such an abundance, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. I want to do a quick little follow-up. In what ways did you allow help to come into your career? Because I know for at least myself, there's you're dealing with intellectual properties, you're dealing with shares, were you allowing people to come in to help you within like actual parts of your career, with whether it's finishing a project or something like that, or are you talking more from like a broad scale as just like you don't need to be completely self-reliant?
A little bit of both. I think I was definitely getting help in terms of an actual poem, like sending my poem to several friends and saying, hey, I need edits on this. which was really hard because I was being in a very vulnerable position to say, hey, this is my honest work. Can you critique it and let me know what you think? So I think I was receiving help in those ways, but I was also receiving help in like the bigger picture, like what is it that I want to do with my career? And being asked that, I think, was really important. And figuring out, okay, well, I see my friends over here who are poets. I don't necessarily want their career. What they're doing is amazing, but that doesn't speak to my heart.
Right.
And so I had to have conversations with mentors, with friends, like, what does that look like for you, Tonya? And then coming to the conclusion, like, well, I really am passionate about poetry and health, and poetry and story, and poetry and healing and therapy and connectivity. And so that was important for me. Is like, okay, how can I, now that I know that that's what I want, like now, how can I seek help in those areas, and who do I have to reach out to further that narrative? And so, so in terms of creativity, I was constantly surrounded by people who wanted to help, who were, championing my story. And so that was so helpful. And then also bringing in the health part of it, I think that was another component, because not only do people want to see me do well in my art and in my creativity, they want to see me do well in my health, which is ultimately my life. And so I think all of that together was incredibly helpful. And I'm so happy that like I allowed that space. And some days, I'm still learning, figuring it out, because I am a true introvert and I sometimes do not want to be bothered with the world, but I'm learning how to find that balance. And even if I share that with someone, like, hey, today I don't want to be around people, but being honest about that, being okay with that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that even gives them the opportunity then to dig into that and be like, is there anything that you need? And then, allowing yourself to be helped there too.
Yeah.
I have a few more questions, but they're a little bit more fun. But before we get into that, would you be willing to recite some of your work?
Absolutely, I would love to. This poem is entitled How to Survive Today, which is actually the title of my next book, which is coming out next week. But yeah, this is one poem that kind of sums up what the entire book is about.
Okay.
How to survive today. It's the small things, the extra fries at the bottom of the bag, the 50% off sale with no exclusions, the nail not chipping each time you drop your phone and there is no crack, the bass of your grandmother's voice, Cardi B getting her entire life, going through checkout and your card not being declined, a hot shower, someone to text, stretching your back, making no time for the bullshit, the brows, no longer sisters but twins, the dinner you don't have to pay for, the DJ playing the one song you've been singing all day, making it home safely, the symptoms finally quiet, the doctor with good news, the house to yourself. It's the small things, a construction of hope, a house of abundance, everything good greeting you at the door and welcoming you home. That's it.
Oh, I love it. And you said, okay, so let's dive right into this. Where can people find your work?
Yes. So I have some performance work on YouTube. If you YouTube Tonya Ingram, I should have a whole host of videos of me performing throughout the years. But I also have a new website, tonyaingram.com, which is where you can find some more work, and where if you'd like to purchase this next book, which will have poems and prompts and affirmations, all dedicated to those of us still finding our way. And so, yeah, tonyaingram.com.
Oh, incredible. I absolutely loved that. I will be purchasing all of your books.
Woo-hoo, thank you.
Of course. Okay, I've got just a couple fun questions here. The first being, is there a parable or a children's tale character that you see yourself in more than others, and why?
Ooh, that's a great question. So this is probably a silly reason, but I'm going to go with The Boy Who Cried Wolf.
Oh, okay.
That's a character.
Yep.
Yeah. And this is a very silly reason, but I love to prank my roommates all of the time with small things too. Like, for example, I told them that like I saw Robert Downey Jr. somewhere in LA and they believed me. And then out of nowhere, I'll say, just kidding. And they get so annoyed with me that when I actually see someone, they don't believe me. Or when I actually have something truthful, they don't believe me. So I'm going with the Boy Who Cried Wolf because I definitely
That's hilarious.
I need to learn my lesson.
Oh my gosh. All right. That's a first. Okay. Another question, fun one. What is a skill that you wish you were extremely proficient at and why?
Oh my goodness. I wish I was extremely proficient at cooking.
Oh.
I am not a good cook. Anytime I make rice, it comes out super soggy and wet. And
so how do you survive?
I do a lot of ordering food, or I'll make like tacos because I'm like, I can't mess up tacos, or cereal, which is so easy. But yeah, I wish I was a better cook. I think it's such a skill, such an art, and I completely suck at it.
Well, at least you're honest. So, last question that I have is, what is a question that you wish I would have asked you?
Oh, I think one question, not just you, but I wish in general we asked each other is, how are you really? Because I think, often when I'm asked, how are you? I say good or fine or okay, just to not really talk about it, whatever it is that I'm going through, good or bad. And so I think that's a beautiful question to ask people. Just how are you really? Like, where are you right now in life? And that there's no need or responsibility to fake it, but to just honestly be okay with exactly where you're going through. And yeah, so that's a question I think I would like to be asked.
Tonya, how are you really?
Thank you. I am really doing okay. And okay meaning like today could be better. It's off to a rocky start. This week has been really rocky just in terms of dealing with health stuff. And so I'm doing okay in that. I wish I was feeling better. Like physically, I wish I wasn't nauseous right now. Mm-hmm. And I wish I wasn't feeling sick, but I'm also okay in that I have so many amazing things going on in my life that I'm so incredibly thankful for. So I'm like teetering this middle spot. So okay in a broader sense.
Yeah. Well, I can say this, that from the bottom of my heart, that we are so thankful that you came on the show today and that you spent some time with us, and we're so vulnerable and open with everything that you had to say, whether it was a piece of advice, whether it was a part of your story. So I just want to say thank you so much. Can you please tell everybody one more time where they can find you online or on your socials or anything?
Yes. You can find me at TonyaIngram.com or on Instagram at Tonya Instagram, which is where I put a lot of my updates and poems and things of that nature. And that is it. And before that, I want to say thank you to you, one, for this amazing interview. I think I'm not often asked the questions that you asked, and it was really helpful for me to articulate all of this. So thank you for providing this space and for being an amazing interviewer.
Oh.
And yeah, I just wanted to say thank you.
Of course. Thank you so much. Well, have a great day. Have a wonderful day. I hope you stay warm and stay healthy.
Thank you so much, friend. You too.
We'll talk soon.
Talk to you soon.
All right, bye-bye. I want to thank Tonya again for being on the show, and I hope she's encouraged you to love and care for yourself no matter what it is you're going through. Make sure to subscribe to our show so you don't miss future episodes, and help us build a healthy and collaborative community of creators by sharing this with someone who could use some inspiration today. And lastly, I want to thank our team here at Soundstripe for making the show possible. If you don't know who we are, Soundstripe is a subscription-based music licensing company that provides unlimited music to subscribers for all video and creative needs. If you need music for your podcast, your YouTube channel, vlog, radio show, films, anything, go to soundstripe.com to learn more about our amazing library of music and sound effects. We also create and curate a ton of inspirational and educational material that's featured on our blog. With everything we do, our mission is to keep creatives creating. So once again, thank you all for joining us this week. Hope you tune in with us again. And remember, no matter what, keep creating.